the quickest recovery of health is when you incorporate either raw milk or kefir into your diet.
Welcome to the Wise Traditions Podcast, sponsored by the Weston A. Price Foundation for Wise Traditions in Food, Farming, and the Healing Arts. We are your source for scientific knowledge and traditional wisdom to help you achieve optimal health.
I'm your host, Hilda Labrada Gore. Our guest today is Charlotte Smith, a dynamic woman with a remarkable story. Her children's struggle with eczema led her to raw milk as a possible cure. And this discovery changed the trajectory of her life. Today, among many other endeavors, Charlotte is the owner of Champu Egg Creamery, a micro dairy in Oregon. And Charlotte was just recently named one of the 25 most influential women in food and agriculture by Food Tank. We'll get to the conversation in just a moment. First, we want to thank our sponsors, Magnetico Sleep Pads. Recharge and repair your body while you sleep, magneticosleep.com. And Free and Healthy Children International, offering a safe alternative to vaccination. Visit freeandhealthychildren.org. Now listen to the interview recorded last month via Skype. Welcome to the podcast, Charlotte.
Thank you so much, Hilda. It's great to be here.
So I understand what got you going in this field of raw milk is that you had children who weren't well. Tell me a little bit about that.
Sure. Well, about 10 years ago, both of my kids had had eczema for about 6 years, and they each developed it when they were 6 years old. So it just one day it wasn't there, and the next day it was, and it was all over large parts of their body. My daughter, it was covering her face completely, even her eyelids, and it was very, very miserable. They're 22 and 19 now, so they were 12 and 9 at the time.
So they're just covered with eczema. So what did you do? What did you put on them? What did the doctor recommend?
The only thing the doctor recommended even from the time they first came down to it was steroid cream, which of course we had and we put on at the very worst, especially on my daughter's eyelids, just whenever we had to. And in that 6 years, people recommended all sorts of things. That was way before Facebook. So I was just in moms groups and things. People would say, well, have you tried this vitamin or this herb or this salve or this cream and lotion? And in that 6 years, I tried everything because as a mother of sick children, I was desperate for them to have some relief. So I thought if something was going to work, we were going to do it. So I had different vitamins. And in that 6 years, nothing worked. So I kept trying things and they were still miserable.
So what did you do next?
I had a conversation with someone who just casually mentioned that they had heard an MD speak in California and said where raw milk is legal. And he had said that people were using raw milk to cure their kids' eczema, allergies, and asthma. And this was the first I'd never even heard of raw milk before then, before 10 years ago, because it wasn't available in Oregon very easily. And I was raised very much on processed foods. You went to the store and you bought your skim milk and that was it. But I was willing to try anything, like I said. So I got on the internet and did a search for raw milk and came up with all this information I didn't know existed. I found the Weston Price Foundation. And I found a list of raw milk producers by state. And I actually found someone in our town who had raw milk for sale. And I kind of had to go underground to find it. I had to promise not to tell anybody where I got it because it's legal in Oregon it was on a much more limited basis back then. And I just thought that like everything else I had tried, it was worth a shot. So I brought the raw milk home. And we each had, half a cup or so. And of course, I had zero expectations because in the past 6 years, nothing had worked. I was still searching for what would help my kids, but I really doubted that anything would. But 2 weeks after starting to drink raw milk, and like I said, it wasn't even very much, my son came out and showed me the backs of his hands. He came out of his bedroom and said, "Look, Mom." And up until that point, for 3 years, the backs of his hands were constantly bloody and scabby from just incessant itching. And 2 weeks after starting to drink raw milk, they were completely smooth. They hadn't really itched, in a day since we started. And to me, that was just a miracle. I couldn't believe it because I had never I had not at that point been introduced to the concept of food as medicine. All I knew that, I was raised thinking we had to eat healthy, like low fat, everything, drink Diet Pepsi instead of juice, eat granola bars, boneless, skinless chicken breasts for dinner, stay away from fat at all costs. So all of a sudden, it was like a miracle to me. And I realized that what I eat and what we eat today affects our health today. And then my son's eczema went away completely within about a month or so. My daughter had had eczema for 3 years longer, and it took longer for hers to go away. She was probably completely healed in about 6 months. It started going away slowly, but 6 months later, it was completely gone.
I can just imagine your relief and surprise. Again, you were skeptical because you had had a long time searching for something that would be efficacious with your kids, and nothing was working. So I can just imagine how you felt.
Oh, yeah. Again, as a mother, we would do anything. We would give a kidney to our children, have surgeries, have an arm removed, give them whatever we could to make them feel good. And my kids were miserable and I couldn't do anything about it. So yeah, it was a crazy miracle. And then they weren't the only ones to benefit. So then after we'd been drinking it for that first year, I looked back over the year and realized that, number one, I had seasonal allergies my whole life. So 6 months of the year, I took over-the-counter allergy medication just to be able to walk outside. It was terrible. And I realized that I didn't have to take any medication the next summer.
Wow.
And now it is 10 years later, and I still don't take any medication or have allergies. And also looking over that first year of drinking raw milk, I realized that in years past, my kids who were 9 and 12 were like all the other kids in their school, and they had 1 or 2 rounds of antibiotics every winter for a cold that it turned into an ear infection or bronchitis. That was just normal. And I was totally fine living with that because everybody else's kids were sick and the doctors were used to it. They knew immediately what drug to give us. So I didn't think anything of that. But looking back over the first year, nobody had gone to the doctor. None of us had had even so much as a sniffle. And then now, looking back 10 years, in the last 10 years, none of us have had antibiotics. None of us get sick for, maybe a slight sniffle or something. My kids went all through public school, and other kids even got to the point where they thought they were kind of weird because they never got sick because everybody else gets sick all the time. So it has it's just changed our life.
Didn't you have reservations as a mom? You said you hadn't heard anything about raw milk, but didn't you hear enough to know that some people thought it was dangerous?
Well, no. I suppose now looking back, maybe I should have had reservations, but I'd never heard of it. And just like I'd never heard of any of those other creams and potions and herbs and vitamins, whatever a mom or somebody recommended I try for my kids, I ran out and got it and tried it. I did not read the research. Maybe that was a bad mom thing to do, but no, I was desperate. And if someone said, oh, try zinc capsules, they'll work, I went out and got them. I did not bother reading the side effects.
But what about the mom right now who's listening thinking, I'm scared of raw milk? You say it brought healing to your family, but I've heard too many horror stories. What would you tell her?
Well, that's a really good place to be nowadays. There has been so much more exposure of raw milk in the last 10 years, so people do hear about it. And also, there's a few things to remember. People, the worst stories are the ones that get passed on. Raw milk it's unprocessed. Milk is pasteurized or more than boiled to remove any pathogenic bacteria that might have gotten in there. So in our world today around the US, where many states raw milk production is unregulated, the conditions it's produced in can be sketchy. So the parent or the person, the consumer of raw milk, has to educate themselves and has to do their own homework to make sure they're getting really good, safe raw milk.
This is how I think of it sometimes. Raw milk, when it's good, is amazing. But raw milk, when it's bad or poorly prepared or processed or, gotten is really bad, right?
Yeah. And there have been very few illnesses caused by raw milk directly. The CDC is able to skew the statistics so they can take things like raw milk cheeses that people might be making, and cheeses can be a lot more susceptible to things like listeria because it can be made in a kitchen and that's in our drain and it sits in cultures. So then they take all those statistics from raw milk cheese and put them in there, lump them together and make it look like raw milk makes people sick. But when you break it down, and there's lots of research on the internet to show how this is, there really aren't illnesses from raw milk. Certainly no deaths in the last 30 years. There was an E. coli outbreak on a farm in Oregon near ours about 4 years ago, and they just lived about 15 minutes from our house. And that did sicken people, but those people were producing milk in filthy conditions. If you went to their farm, and you can see pictures of their farm on the internet, common sense tells you do not eat or drink anything from that farm. They were so negligent. So I think if a person, a mother, a father prepares themselves, for instance, I have a list of things on my website, how to find safe raw milk. If they have a list of these things and they go out searching for raw milk in maybe their unregulated state, they can be really sure they're going to find safe raw milk, because raw milk, if you do the things that now I have gone on to start a website called rawmilkpro.com where I teach other raw milk producers how to produce safe milk. If you do the things I teach, you are going to produce safe raw milk every single time you milk the cows. But what happens is, if raw milk is expensive to produce, so if people start cutting corners because it's expensive, that's when some of the safety precautions can be dropped. We have hundreds of safety precautions on our farm, and those are things I put in my document I hand out to people to help find safe raw milk, is ask the farmer if they do all these things and build a relationship with that person, and then you can be sure that you're finding safe raw milk.
Are you a part of a group that regulates raw milk?
No, I am part of a group called the Raw Milk Institute, but they do not regulate raw milk because that is just not done on a national level. But what they have done is created standards for raw milk production that are totally voluntary. So I was inspected by this group. I had to show them my safety plans, which are probably 30 pages of documents of every single safety precaution we take on our farm. That had to be approved. We had a personal inspection in our barn. Everything was inspected, inside, outside, valves and little things on jars and everything. So that I could become a member of the Raw Milk Institute. Well, and it's called listed, and these are for legal reasons. They can't use the word regulated. They can't use the word certified, so they use the word listed. There are about 8 or 9 farmers listed with the Raw Milk Institute, and because it's a long process to make sure someone qualifies, they're added slowly. But you can be certain that if you find a dairy farmer who is a member of the Raw Milk Institute, they are producing the cleanest milk ever that you could possibly find. And again, I want to say that it's all voluntary. So you really have to know your farmer and know that they are a type of person who is, will achieve these high standards even when nobody's watching.
Tell me something though, why isn't the government interested in promoting raw milk? Why are they not regulating it themselves instead of having this ban or this state by state thing?
There's a lot of reasons. I think the main reason it comes down to, like most everything with the government, is money. The processors are the ones making money. If we take away the processing of milk, there are so many huge organizations with millions and even billions of lobbying dollars who would lose money. And so raw milk in America, we have no lobbyists. We're a bunch of farmers with not very much money because it's very expensive to produce. So we have no political power at all. And I've had a little bit of experience with this in Oregon, because when it healed my kids, and then when I became a member of the Raw Milk Institute and realized, we have the capability of producing safe raw milk every single time, I started to get involved on a local level, and I met with the head of our Department of Ag, and I met with the executive director for Oregon Dairy Farmers. And these gentlemen looked me in the eye, and you can't get any higher than them in dairy in Oregon. And both of them said, there's no way in hell you will ever make raw milk legal. So it's all comes back to money. They don't make money on real food. And it's not just raw milk. It's traditional foods, pastured meats and all that. They make money when people go to the store and buy processed foods, and they make money when we all buy drugs. Now, my family, when I add up the money we used to spend on medications up until 10 years ago that we don't spend anymore, it's we can't have all of America doing that, because all these drug companies, it would just start a free fall of things going out of business.
Yeah, I see that money drives a lot of things. You said the CDC skews statistics. Is that part of the reason why you think they're doing that as well? Explain that.
Absolutely. They're all tied in, they're very far reaching. I would never, after my short experience trying to work with Oregon politics, I just keep to myself, it's nothing I could possibly take on, because not only are they working with the CDC to skew statistics, but then they go on to do things like contacting large insurance companies in America and tell them, if you have someone with a homeowner's policy who's producing raw milk, even if it's one cow, you drop them. And anyone who has a mortgage knows that you have to have home insurance. It's a requirement, or your mortgage will be called in. Well, I can't. So therefore, you can't afford to not have homeowners insurance, because most of us don't have $100,000 or $200,000 or $300,000 cash to pay off our loan when it comes due, because we can no longer get insurance. So all these governmental agencies work together to make sure that they make the most money possible. And when something like this comes along that might threaten them, they know they can just take some very small steps to prevent us from gaining any sort of foothold.
We pause now to recognize our sponsors. Did you know that you are dependent on the Earth's magnetic field for life? Did you know the Earth's magnetic field has declined drastically? Magnetico sleep pads are essential to correct that deficiency. Recharge and repair your body while you sleep. Visit magneticosleep.com. Again, that's magneticosleep.com. And parents, are you concerned about vaccine side effects? Free and Healthy Children International offers a simple, safe, and effective way to reduce infectious disease in your family. Homeoprophylaxis. Free and Healthy Children International supports research and access to homeoprophylaxis, the vaccine alternative. Visit freeandhealthychildren.org to find a practitioner in your area. Now, back to the interview.
So the other thing they've taken away in the insurance world is raw milk liability insurance is hardly available. If you produce a food product and sell it, you can get liability insurance in case you accidentally make someone sick for any food except raw milk. So, and there might be a few isolated cases in America. And for instance, the big grade A dairies, they can get raw milk liability insurance. But if you're not a grade A certified dairy and that's not a requirement of your state, you can't. So we're completely legal raw milk dairy in the state of Oregon, but we can't get standard liability insurance.
I just chuckled, but I'm actually horrified. This sounds so scandalous. It sounds like every obstacle is in the way of the person wanting to produce raw milk.
It is. Oh, there are so many obstacles. And because of that fact, a lot of people start to produce raw milk, often because of reasons like ours. They had a health recovery, a dramatic health recovery in their family. They live out in the country. They can get a cow, they get a milk cow, and they realize the incredibly high cost of having a family milk cow, and they go out of business. So it just continues to be this spiral that it's hard to find. When you do find it, it's expensive because the law makes it almost impossible. For instance, in Oregon, we're limited to 3 cows or fewer if we're going to sell raw milk. Well, then it takes me as long to milk my 3 cows as it takes the neighbor to milk their 300 cows, because there's no economy of scale with 3 cows. That's 100 times, that's several hundred times more. So the cost reflects that. And there's just no way to produce it, make it more common right now. I mean, there are just so many obstacles.
Well, and that being the case, I understand that you've started a company to encourage small farmers to make it worth their while to have cows and all this. Tell us about that.
Well, 6 years ago, I started my raw milk dairy, and I learned a lot by trial and error. And I brought all my marketing skills that I had because I owned two businesses prior to starting the farm, and I knew how to market them. So I took those skills and applied them to my farm, and I continued to use specifically online marketing methods to market my products here on my farm. So I don't have an online business. I have a farm. We sell things off the farm, but I use cutting edge techniques to market my products. And so we sell out of, now we sell beef, chicken, pork, eggs, and milk. We produce on 75 acres. We sell out of everything, and we often have a wait list. So what I realized is every single raw milk producer that was in business when I started 6 years ago is out of business for years now. And most producers I know last about 2 years before they go out of business. And this is sickening to me. It's heart-wrenching because I have people calling me begging for raw milk for their kids' eczema, just like mine. Sometimes it's newborn babies. And it's adults with all kinds of diseases that we have so much evidence that it heals, and I can't help all of them. So I would give anything to have a huge pool of safe raw milk in Oregon to help all these people, and I can't. But what I can do is teach other farmers what I've done to make my business sustainable. So I spent last year writing down and putting in a course everything I have done to market my business and build it in the last 6 years. And I teach that over a 4-week period twice a year. And it has been so exciting. I work with people all across the United States. We even have some people signed up from Australia and New Zealand. So it can be around the world because I teach it online. We don't teach it here at the house. You don't have to do it in person. It's marketing, so you can learn that online. But it's also created, for instance, in our class, we have a secret Facebook group. So anyone who ever takes our course can be in this secret Facebook group. So you can, which just means anybody else on Facebook can't see it. So it's just for people who are marketing their small farms, and we can bounce ideas off each other. It's almost like a mastermind group for small farmers who really are in it to be successful and sustainable, which means economically you have to make a profit too, or you're not going to stay in business. And so it's been exciting to have the community and to have other small farmers take the course. And within the first week or two of starting the course, they're already seeing more money coming in. It's very exciting to me to share what's worked for me with other people.
Your objective is not just to feed your family and community, but you see that there's a greater need that your farm can't supply. So you're really encouraging people to get in there too, to get in the business and to stay afloat.
Totally. And I don't know if I mentioned the course. It's 3cowmarketing.com. But yes, I hear from people all around America every single day of the huge diseases they have recovered from by eating traditional foods and by switching to a traditional foods diet. So we have to have these farmers. When I see my kids heal, and I know other people can have the same healing, it's become this greater mission that the world needs to know that if you eat this way, you don't have to have cancer and MS and IBS and Crohn's disease and ulcerative colitis and rheumatoid arthritis and celiac disease and all the myriad diseases we read about and I hear about every day. We don't have to live that way. So I become kind of, I suppose, very passionate about getting the message out there, but also teaching farmers how to do what they can do to support this.
So Charlotte, I feel like you're really a part of a raw milk and real food movement. Do you feel that way too?
Absolutely. This has changed my life tremendously. It turned around my life. It turned around my husband's life, who had ulcerative colitis for 15 years. And now I have hundreds and hundreds of health recovery stories in our farm store that I get to listen to every single week. And I blog about some of those. I do interviews with those people because I do feel like the rest of America and the world needs to know that our reliance on drugs to heal us and, oh, I'm sick, I'll just go to the doctor and get something, is not going to work. And long term, you're going to pay the price of not choosing to eat real food now. So I rarely have anybody that comes into our farm store and complains about the prices, because most of our customers have done a little research ahead of time. But if someone complains about the price, we have so many stories of how much money you save, and so much research shows what you save when you invest in real food now and turn around or prevent some of those diseases that people are getting now that would just cause them an early death or whatever. So yes, the movement is huge. I've seen it because I've been involved in it for 10 years now. I've seen it come a long way in 10 years. 10 years ago, none of my friends had heard of raw milk either. They thought I was crazy. 5 years ago, I saw it become more popular, and it just grows in popularity every year till now. I see it mentioned in very mainstream magazines and things like that. So the whole world is gaining an awareness that if you eat right, which in my case includes raw milk, it's the way to go so we don't do ourselves in.
Well, let's say that you've convinced me. I'm a young mom and I want to get some raw milk. How can I get it? What if it's illegal in my state?
Oh, well, if it was me, because I've seen what raw milk does, I would get up and move, because it has changed our family's life. I mean, okay, so there, that's okay. It. But of course, that's not an option for some people. But if you knew how it would change your life, you would go somewhere where it's legal.
Another idea is, I think there is a website called realmilk.com, and people might be able to find a source from a nearby state or from a chapter leader in their area. Often chapter leaders might know where they can get raw milk as well. So sometimes there are ways, like you say, kind of cloak and dagger ways to get your milk if you need it.
Right. And that's where I found raw milk initially, is, again, like I alluded to, I stumbled on the Weston Price organization, stumbled on the realmilk.com, and then found something in our neighborhood. So yeah, realmilk.com lists it out by state. And there are, especially in the East Coast where the state lines are closer, people can drive across and get milk in other states and bring it home. You can't transport milk across state lines if you're a business, but for personal consumption, you can.
What is one thing that you would suggest that the listener do to improve their health?
Well, without a doubt, the one thing I tell everybody who walks in our farm store and calls in emails is start on kefir. It's life-changing. And then from there, there's hundreds of other things they could do. But just the addition of kefir, not kefir from the store, because that's been pasteurized after they make it wonderful with probiotics, then they pasteurize it and kill everything. So not store-bought kefir, but kefir from a heritage grain. And again, it will change your life. And then there's so many more things you could do to add on to that. But when we first started, just to reinforce that, 10 years ago, all we did that first couple of years was add raw milk to our diet. At that point, we were still eating low-fat everything else and processed and granola bars and breakfast cereal. All we did was add raw milk. So raw milk or raw milk kefir are the things that I hear, because now we hear these hundreds of health recovery stories all the time. Those are the things I hear the most dramatic recovery and quickest recovery from. Any food, hands down, the quickest recovery of health is when you incorporate either raw milk or kefir into your diet.
Charlotte, well, this has been a great conversation. Thank you so much for taking the time today.
Thank you so much, Hilda. Thanks for getting the message out. I just love spreading the word that we can heal through food. It's great.
Thanks for listening today. Wise Traditions is brought to you by the Weston A. Price Foundation for wise traditions in food, farming, and the healing arts. What do you think of today's topic? Shoot us an email at podcast@westonaprice.org and let us know. You can also find us on Facebook, Weston A. Price Foundation, and Twitter @Weston A. Price. For more information on today's subject and our guests, go to our website, westonaprice.org, and click on the word podcast.